It was her last evening in that harsh winter when she was supposed to die. She walked slowly, dying from cold, hunger, and fatigue. Her feet were shod in light shoes that did nothing to protect her feet from the piercing frost. Cassia walked, trying to get as far away as possible to save herself. However, people were always following her, trying to kill her, and they had a very good chance of doing so. She heard the whistle of an arrow flying towards her and turned around sharply. But it was already too late. It reached her, flying straight into her back. As had happened in her life for a long time, she was constantly receiving blows to the back. Cassia couldn't believe that she would have to die so ingloriously. She fell, but tried to get up, but the pain in her back from the bleeding wound did not allow her to do so. So she lay there, thinking that today everything could end so simply. Opening her eyes, she saw two people leaning over her, who said that the job was done and that she could report it to Duke Seldry. She saw people walking away, leaving her to die in the snow. Cassia imagined Jaina saying that such a rich family had ended up so stupidly. She remembered their last meeting, when she came to her in prison, before Cassia was expelled from the country. The Duchy of Hall was the largest in the empire, and it gained this fame for its constant assistance to the emperor. Among other nobles, they were considered higher because they owned a very important talisman. Since they were close to the emperor, it was decided from childhood that she would become the wife of the crown prince. Therefore, instead of doing the usual childish things, she spent all her time learning to be worthy of the imperial family. She spent all her free time studying to be a real crown princess when the time came. Her fiancé, Delius, seemed to be completely in love with her. He swore his tender feelings to her and promised that he would always love only her. They spent a lot of time together, but he turned out to be completely narrow-minded. When she was accused of using black magic, her life changed dramatically. There were whispers behind my back. No one approved of the possession of black magic powers. And when Delius asked her directly if she really was a witch, she did not expect this from him and was confused. Cassia simply started screaming that it was impossible. Since he himself had known her since childhood, he couldn't believe it. However, he still left her, saying that he could not connect his fate with a woman who practices black magic. Then she was left with only her family, her father and brother. But she was also helped by Jaina, who became her faithful friend. She came into her life completely unexpectedly, becoming her brother's lover. They had a very beautiful romantic relationship. No one could doubt that she loved her man. Jaina met her brother at a ball, and she was the only one who defended Cassia when she was attacked because of these malicious rumors. But then the unexpected happened. Her father conspired with Duke Kane, the conspiracy was uncovered, and as a result, they were sentenced to death. Cassia couldn't believe it, but she too found herself in prison. And what was her surprise when she learned that her friend turned out to be a vile traitor? She immediately began dating Prince Delius, who had rejected her and was in need of a new crown princess. Such a turn of fate was impossible to expect. Cassia, who was present at the execution of her father and Duke Kane, could not believe their deaths. Before his death, the father asked her for forgiveness, looking down. Duke Kane simply remained silent. He seemed completely innocent. While in the cell, where the only light came from burning torches, Cassia heard familiar footsteps. She saw Jaina grinning and saying that her family had been too weak. Cassia screamed and demanded that she save her father, that Jaina make things right. She screamed, cried, and called for friendly feelings because they were friends. Standing behind the bars, Cassia asked her to make things right. However, Jaina only chuckled and said that it was no longer possible to save her father. The dead were not brought back. Laughing, standing in a luxurious dress, she said that her family itself was to blame for its own collapse. It all started with her brother, who voluntarily gave the stone to Duke Kane. This is where her family's downfall began. Jaina laughed as she told him how stupid her brother was, who was about to be arrested right on the battlefield. With his death, there will be no one left in their family. The Grand Duchy of Hall will be lost forever. Of course, there was still Cassia, but she was facing death in the near future, since she would not be able to survive exile. Jaina did all this to become the crown princess. It was very important to her. She said that the Hall family's stupidity made it too easy to get, which made it a little uncomfortable. But a win is a win, and she didn't have to worry about it because she got everything she wanted. All that was left for Cassia was to die. The winters were harsh these days. She wouldn't be able to survive them on her own, and no one would help her. The girl looked at her face and could not understand when Jaina became so angry. Why couldn't she see this before? Why did she believe her with all her soul because it was possible to guess? However, it was now too late, and she was destined to die far from home. She knew she didn't want to die like that, without avenging her family. They were very good people. They couldn't just be destroyed. It was wrong. Looking up at the sky with dying eyes, Cassia prayed to God to give her another chance to fix all this. And at that moment, the clock of fate seemed to turn back. The glass behind which they were located seemed to crumble. They started spinning backwards, counting down the long time until there would be enough time to fix the whole situation. Cassia opened her eyes and didn't understand where she was. The warm, pink room was so much like hers that she felt like she had woken up in paradise. She tried to get up carefully, mindful of her injury, very carefully, because it seemed that her back still hurt. At that moment, she reached out her hand and realized that he was feeling very well. Getting out of bed, she decided to go to the mirror. She knew the arrangement of objects in this room very well, because she chose them herself. But the mirror seemed to deceive her when she touched it. She saw that she was now much younger than when she died. So time threw her back much earlier. She touched the calendar on her table, and she saw the date. It was 4,356, which meant her brother had not yet met Jaina, since that ball had not yet taken place. Cassia realized that she had a lot of time to fix the situation and prevent her family from dying. After all, this is what she asked for when she begged God to bring her back. She needs to prevent the meeting between her brother and Jaina at all costs, and also save their relic. She couldn't believe that last time it all ended so sadly. However, now she had the opportunity to fix everything. She went over all the moments of those conversations with Jaina. At that moment, the maid came in and asked why the mistress had gotten up so early. She replied that she couldn't sleep, after which she agreed to let the maid help her get dressed. While the maid combed her hair, she thought about what Jaina had told her when she was in the cell. She remembered her ex-friend saying that her brother was so weak that he went against the family and immediately gave her the stone to please himself. She also remembered how she said that her victory had come too easily. Looking at herself in the mirror, Cassia thought that this time at least, Jaina wouldn't have to complain about everything coming too easy for her. The stone in question was obtained during battles led by the emperor who reigned during the time of her great-grandfather. He managed to defeat the monsters that were guarding him. These were the monsters from the north. The emperor kept it as a trophy, as it was believed that this stone had protective properties. It was named Aura Stone and kept away from monsters, symbolizing the strength of Audrey's empire. Everyone associated him with the flourishing of the country, which became more powerful every day, and after hundreds of years became the most powerful state on the continent of Huler. Everyone believed that the power contained in the protective stone ensured the prosperity of the empire. However, the emperor decided to give this trophy to the House of Cassius. And when Aura Stone came into their family, their influence increased greatly. And many people didn't like this. Other nobles were unhappy. Nevertheless, the stone brought prosperity to their family, which could not but please its members. But there was a lot of intrigue surrounding it, so Aura Stone had to be kept in a separate place. Cassia herself could not understand how their family could not cope with the weight of this stone. It was even less clear to her why the Tower Master wanted to get his hands on it. When she thought about it, a week had already passed since she returned to the past, but she still hadn't figured out anything. At that moment, she heard a familiar voice ask if she was there, and the maid replied that she was currently in the library. It was her brother Xavier asking why she wasn't answering. He was also curious about what she was doing in the library at this time, and to his question, Cassia replied that she was looking for a book, after which she offered to make tea. She wanted to be with her brother to find out what he was thinking, and she also needed to ask a couple of questions. However, Xavier spoke first and asked, since she had been doing this for 2 hours already, if she had already drunk tea, then she could leave the library since he needed to work. It was a somewhat harsh proposal, but it did not embarrass Cassia in the least. She told him not to worry and to mind his own business. She wouldn't disturb him. Her brother noticed that she had been acting strange lately and wondered if she wanted to tell him what had happened to her. Cassia said that everything was fine. She couldn't tell her brother that she saw him die. She thought to herself that they hadn't met Jaina yet, and she had to make sure that didn't happen. However, this was supposed to happen at a ball to which they were both invited, so the chances of such an outcome were very slim. Cassia looked up and asked if her father was very busy right now. The brother replied that he had important business with the emperor in a few days. The Grand Duke Cain Audrey would arrive at the palace, so there was a lot of preparation. Cassia was surprised that Cain was already arriving. Everything seemed to be developing faster. The brother noticed that His Majesty had decided to let the Duke into the palace. Remembering the story, Cassia thought that he probably wanted to keep him close under surveillance. But judging by the fact that last time he executed his half-brother for treason, one can assume that he has been keeping an eye on him for a long time. The more merit, the more influence, she said out loud. Her brother was surprised by such speeches. Looking at her, he thought that she was quite perceptive, although earlier he had assumed that his sister was still a fool. However, their conversation was interrupted, and at that moment a servant announced that the crown prince had arrived to see them. Cassia suddenly made a displeased face, which seemed quite surprising to her brother. He decided that he needed to push her a little, noticing that the prince had arrived and that she needed to go faster. Looking at her, he asked what happened, why she had such a face. Usually she was so happy to see him. Getting up, Cassia said, "Is it really possible to always be in the same mood? That would be strange." Moreover, she still remembered that her fiancé had turned out to be very cruel in his past life, and so now she had a certain disgust towards him, but a strange feeling it seemed to her that he would easily repeat what he had done before. However, upon hearing her steps, he immediately turned around. Deli Audrey, the crown prince, handsome and yet cruel. She walked towards him, not understanding how to behave with him, knowing the future. But there was no need to show it now. She tried to put on a sweet smile, saying that she was glad to see him. He noticed that he had been very busy in recent days and had not been able to visit her, after which he asked if she had missed him. Cassia froze. Did he really think she had nothing better to do than sit and be bored? However, biting her tongue in time, she looked at him and smiled sweetly. Deli took her hand in his and said that he had booked a restaurant she liked, so they needed to hurry. Cassia didn't expect this. Somehow during the week she spent without him, her feelings changed. However, he immediately pulled her by the hand to go to the restaurant. Already sitting in the carriage, she thought that he had not even asked her opinion and had decided everything himself. She remembered that he always did this, but for some reason she liked it then. Cassia thought that there was no need to get along with Delius yet. After all, a quarrel with the imperial family would not bring anything good to her loved ones. Oddly enough, the prince was quite attentive and realized that Cassia was in a bad mood, but he was sure that she would feel better after a delicious meal. For some reason he was convinced that she really liked this place. Cassia tried her best not to show her bad mood, it was too reckless now. And her fiancé looked at her so stupidly, admiring her, that it couldn't help but irritate him. So she just tried to stay calm, reminding herself that she was here for someone else. He was quite handsome after all, and his intense gaze was hard to bear. But damn, it's not chocolate cake. Why does he always order it after all? She doesn't like it and has said so many times. She had just started to feel better after her last decision, and now she was angry again. Cassia was probably just disappointed, not understanding how she had ever thought of living with him her whole life. And her fiancé immediately took a piece of cake with a fork and decided to throw it into her mouth. Looking at her, he said, "She loves him, God. How could he not remember?" She said a couple of times that she doesn't like chocolate cake. But Cassia didn't have the strength to argue, so she looked at the prince's stupid face and couldn't understand how he could be so indifferent. Putting a piece of cake in his mouth, she told him to eat his own. She already had her own portion. The prince was shocked by this. He could not understand why Cassia was so strange today. However, at that moment, their privacy was disturbed by an unexpected guest. She addressed Cassia by name, and the prince looked at her in surprise, a little annoyed that their privacy had been disturbed. Cassia remembered that in her past life they met a little later, but at this very time. Now this was completely awkward. She was already having a hard time keeping the right facial expression. However, this did not stop Jaina, and smiling sweetly, she greeted her. Looking at such a sweet face, Cassia could not understand how she managed to hide a truly vile soul behind such cuteness. It all looked like it was all planned, because Jaina felt confident and even assertive. Was Cassia really so weak-willed in her past life that she could be pushed around so easily? She put on a serene face, but the memories still came flooding back. This girl belonged to the house of Duke Seldry, one of the most powerful families of the Audrey Empire. Moreover, they were an association of many nobles who created a huge, powerful force. Cassia hadn't figured it out yet, but she could guess that in their past life, it was their actions that led to the decline of their family. But she couldn't prove anything. She just had to be on guard with these nobles, otherwise she would lose her family again. It was not without the help of her relatives that Jaina locked her behind bars. And then she stood there and grinned at her. Cassia's blood began to boil. At that moment her voice brought her back to reality. Looking at the prince, Jaina asked in a completely neutral, but at the same time enthusiastic voice who it was. She just didn't blink her eyes. Cassia thought that a little more and she would explode. However, while sipping tea, she said that it was Deli Audrey. She remembered that last time he was away, and she met Jaina alone. At that moment, the impudent girl feigned exclamation and said, "Could this really be His Highness the Crown Prince?" These are the kind of admiring eyes that men love. Cassia wondered if it was really not obvious from his clothes that he was a prince, or if she was just pretending not to know. After this, Jaina bowed gracefully and said that she was glad to meet His Highness. He remembered the rules of etiquette and said that he was also glad to meet you, after which he asked what the lady's name was. The girl introduced herself, and Deli noted that he had heard that she had outstanding predictive abilities. Even his mother considered her as a candidate for the role of the Crown Prince's bride, but after Cassia, he thought to himself that only his bride lived in his heart. At this point, Jaina, without any embarrassment, decided to take charge. Cassia sat and thought, but she was like a fish in water and immediately moved her chair back. Having plopped down into it, sitting down gracefully, she said that Cassia had told her a lot about the prince. Could it really be that they had been friends since childhood? Cassia turned to her and in an icy tone told her why she sat there. Jaina turned around and asked again, while the prince was embarrassed by his bride's tactlessness. However, Cassia looked at her firmly and said that they were talking in private. Could Jaina please make room? And her look did not bode well, since Cassia decided to be firm this time. She would never let that impudent thief take her place again. She became embarrassed. Usually her charm always helped, but once something went wrong, Jaina stood up shyly, apologized, and said she would go then. She expected Cassia to feel ashamed and stop her, but she immediately turned her attention to the prince and said that the flowers he had given her last time were still blooming beautifully. Delius was still embarrassed by this scene, chuckled nervously, but said that he was glad about it. Jaina walked away with clenched fists, spitting at the behavior of this impudent girl Hall, and Cassia wondered how long this Jaina would pretend, how long she would be able to maintain her mask. She looked at them from afar, realizing that she had missed a very good opportunity to get closer to the prince. But she knew that this was not the last one. She would definitely take her place. On the other hand, Jaina couldn't understand, because Cassia didn't know about her plans anyway, and had always been quite nice to her. Looking at her, she thought that everything she had would be taken away from her. Who would have thought that just a second ago a sweet girl suddenly turned into a terrible, evil freak? She promised herself to crush her pride. Cassia would not be able to get everything she wanted. The evening ended, night came. But Cassia still couldn't fall asleep, as her thoughts were currently hovering around important matters. She remembered Jaina. In a past life they all met for the first time at a ball. But now everything has gone wrong. We must not let our guard down. Perhaps the meeting with her brother will happen sooner. Even if she cannot prevent it, we must make sure that he does not fall in love. Will she be able to change the tragedy of her past life with her own strength? She just needs to do everything to make it work. She can't let these people kill her family a second time. She suddenly realized that she was terribly tired. This day had simply exhausted her. Cassia was incredibly tired and decided to lie down, but at that moment the others were not sleeping. An unexpected guest appeared in the magic tower. Despite the late hour, the master did not sleep thanks to his powers. He learned that everything interesting was yet to come. An interesting event was supposed to happen today. A visitor came to him who could bring him good news. Despite this, he noticed that the guest was rather unexpected. Without even turning around, he asked what brought her here. The girl said that she came to offer him a profitable deal. She said that she would help him get the very protective stone that he had been looking for so long. The master turned around and asked if rumors of his search had reached her and how she intended to help him. The girl finally took off her hood, revealing her face. It was Jaina who stated that her friendship with Cassia would help her with this. Besides, she has predictive abilities, that should be enough. The master thought about it because the offer was truly tempting. He even stood up from his chair and asked what she wanted in return. Holding his chair, he waited for her answer, already guessing what the conversation would be about. Jaina asked for support for her family, so that on the day she becomes the bride of the crown prince, he will receive much more than he does now. The master noticed that she had a rather base desire. She reasonably noted that she came to him with a proposal. The master smiled and noted that she had courage, but to make him act, she had to show what she was capable of. The girl smirked this time and said that it wouldn't happen now. However, looking him straight in the eyes, she said that he would soon see everything for himself. The owners of the Duchy of Hall lived in a huge castle. The next morning, Cassia noticed that her brother was in a hurry. She called out to him, and he was a little confused, not expecting her to get up so early. Cassia asked where he was going early in the morning. He replied that Duke Kane would soon arrive in the capital and that he needed to go to the welcoming ceremony with his father. Cassia was surprised that he had already arrived, but her brother replied that it had happened earlier than expected. The girl thought that not only had the emperor ordered the duke to come to the capital this year to pay him tribute, but he had also arrived here ahead of time. It was rather strange, for it was not the first time that Duke Kane had fought off an enemy, but he had never been invited to receive honors. At that moment, the brute poked his finger into his sister's forehead and asked what she was thinking about. She should relax her face. It was a clear hint that she would get wrinkles. Cassia chuckled and asked if she could go with him. She wanted to get some fresh air. In fact, she wanted to attend the ceremony. Her brother pointed out that she would have to wait outside. Wouldn't she be bored? And wouldn't it be better for her to meet Lady Jaina? Cassia asked why he suddenly started talking about her and if he had really met her. The brother answered negatively, but was surprised by her reaction because he thought they were friends. The sister coldly remarked that they had only met a few times because she was one of the nobles and they were not friends at all. The brother turned away and said with disappointment that he thought she finally had a friend. After all, she needed not only to accompany the prince, it was time to make at least one friend. Cassia suddenly grabbed his hand sharply, saying that she was grateful for the advice, but she would decide for herself who to communicate with and that he should not be interested in Jaina or get involved with her family. The brother was very surprised by such a sharp outburst and asked if something had happened between them. She may be avoiding Lady Jaina, but why? Looking her brother firmly in the eyes, she said that she would know when the time came. He just had to listen to her. After this, leaving her puzzled brother, she said that she would come soon. She only wanted to change clothes to go with him to the emperor's palace. The royal castle looked as luxurious as it should have. Xavier told his sister that he would meet with Duke Kane and return. She replied that she would wait for him in the garden so as not to interfere. Standing among the guests, the father and son talked to each other. The elder duke said he had not expected His Majesty to pay so much attention in welcoming the duke. Even earlier, when the duke returned victorious, the emperor limited himself to a few praises. Father noticed that monsters had appeared in the north and it would be better for the duke to be there. Xavier said he thought the emperor was against Duke Kane's arrival, but his father doubted it. He said that he was 5 years old when his mother, the empress, was overthrown and left the palace. At that time it was a significant event. The boy was left without a mother, and the youngest duke was sent north at an early age. And he alone defended these lands. Apparently His Majesty knew of his loyalty. However, he still kept the boy away from him, so there were reasons. The son asked if he was really now being invited to live in the capital for good, and the father answered vaguely. At that moment they heard someone's welcoming cry. Turning around, they saw an unexpected guest. It was the Lord of the Tower. They asked why he was there. He answered that the emperor had summoned him to an audience. However, both interlocutors were very surprised. The Tower's lord replied that he could not miss the hero's arrival from the border. He also noted that he had one thing to do with both of them. He reminded them of the Aura Stone, which he had been interested in earlier, received from the imperial family, which brought prosperity to the Hall family. Duke Hall laughed and asked if he really believed this legend about the stone. However, I immediately heard that this was not entirely a lie. The Tower Lord noted that the legend could very well be true. At that moment, Cassia was walking in Maurice's garden. She used to come here often with the prince when they were still children. Looking at the butterfly, she thought with regret that those days could never be returned. If everything goes as in the past life, after the Duke's arrival, the Emperor will hold a grand ball. And there her brother will meet Jaina and they will fall in love with each other. Cassia could not understand why the Tower's lord wanted to take possession of the Aura Stone, but if it appeared in his hands, their family would be slandered and destroyed. Therefore, it was important to prevent Jaina from taking the stone. As for Duke Kane, they had almost no contact in their past lives. He was a faithful defender of the North. Cassia wondered why everything had changed so much, why he had decided to rebel against the Emperor. Who was to blame for this? Who took such a deep part in this issue? After all, Duke Kane didn't just rebel, he also implicated her father in treason. She remembered seeing him behind bars, and him asking her for forgiveness because her family had suffered because of him. This was their first and last conversation. They were not close, they just had the same fate. At that moment she heard approaching footsteps, and she saw Duke Kane, the half-brother of the current emperor, right in front of her. He was walking straight towards her. She could no longer hide anywhere. The meeting was unexpected. Cassia was confused, but she couldn't help but notice that he looked quite masculine. So when he started to approach her, she greeted him by name. He was somewhat surprised by this, as they had not been introduced to each other before. Dark-haired and green-eyed, stately, with chiseled features, he asked with whom he had the honor of speaking. Cassia was embarrassed. Realizing that he didn't know her yet, she needed to introduce herself. His open, disconcerting green gaze confused her. Their destinies were linked. She needed to understand the Duke's motives and prevent slander, and she immediately decided that she needed to make him her ally. There was a high probability that he had been set up at the time, and then she would be able to save not only her family. After making this decision within herself, she introduced herself and bowed. Fortunately, thanks to her youth and beauty, she could count on a warm welcome. The Duke remarked that he had heard a lot about her, which stirred Cassia's thoughts. I wonder if it was something like the Crown Prince's beloved. She decided to change the subject and said that there were rumors that he had won a recent battle with monsters, after which she congratulated him. He noted that he had simply fulfilled his duty to the Empire, after which he asked for forgiveness and said that he had to meet with the Emperor, then turned around and left. Cassia thought that he was indeed a man of few words, as they said, and she wondered what he was really like. Although the Duke thought he was seeing her for the first time, he could not understand how she recognized him immediately. However, something about this girl intrigued him, and as he left, he couldn't help but think about her. At the palace, he was greeted by the Emperor, who noticed that he had come a long way. Emperor Miles Audrey ruled the entire empire. His Highness noticed that Cain had won another major victory. Duke Cain immediately knelt down. He noted that thanks to the Emperor's trust, he was able to bring news of victory. The Emperor called him the hero of the Audrey Empire, then asked him to stand up, as they had already exchanged greetings. Duke Cain thanked his brother, calling him Your Majesty. After that, everything flowed into the usual course of conversation. The nobles were convinced that the monsters would not appear again, but Cain said that they needed to be constantly on guard. Duke Raoul Seldry, Jayana's father, noted that the treasury was limited and the war might never end. Duke Cain objected and said that it was nevertheless impossible to leave the north undefended. At this point, Cassia's father intervened and said that if it were not for Duke Cain's army, not only the borders but also the capital of the empire would have fallen. At this point, the Emperor intervened and said that they could talk about this later. Cain was tired and needed to rest. He said that apartments had been prepared for him. Cain thanked his brother. Xavier asked his father, Martin Hall, why he said that, since they did not yet know what His Majesty thought about keeping the army in the north, and it was not worth arguing so sharply with other nobles. His father noted that Cain had sacrificed so much for the empire, and in return he received only complaints and discontent. However, he assumed that Cassia was probably tired of waiting for them, and he needed to hurry to her garden. But they didn't find her, so they decided to split up and look separately. The brother kept wondering where she had disappeared to. At that moment he heard a call, a female voice asking if it was Baron Xavier himself. He turned around and said that she was right, but who then was she? The girl smiled sweetly and said that she had simply guessed, then introduced herself as Jaina Seldry, adding that she was a close friend of Cassia. The brother noticed that this was the very lady his sister had told him not to be interested in. The girl continued and said that Cassia told her a lot about him. She was so proud of her brother. He blushed. Jaina continued and said that all the girls praised him for his attractiveness and kindness. Xavier was quite surprised, after which she pretended to be embarrassed and said that in fact she admired him too. At that moment, Cassia's cry was heard, calling for her brother. She stood up and asked what he was doing there anyway. The brother replied that he and her father had been looking for her for a long time. At that moment, Jaina thought, this shrew is interfering again. Cassia was shocked. Not understanding why everything was so strange, it turned out that their meeting had happened in advance, not like last time. The vile woman asked sweetly if Cassia was also there, after which she said that she was walking in the garden and accidentally met Baron Xavier. Then she smiled sweetly at him. Cassia realized that this had been prepared in advance. She had been stalking him. Cassia decided to intervene and said that indeed many girls had asked her about her brother. Jaina herself had said that he was popular. After which she turned to Xavier and said that among them there were many talented and kind people whom she would like to introduce to him. Then she noticed that there were those who approached him with impure intentions, thinking that Cassia did not see their meanness, after which she turned to Jaina and asked if this was not true. She just laughed and said that she didn't know who they were talking about and how such people could be near such a kind person like her. Cassia narrowed her eyes at her and said that there would always be people like that. They hover around fresh and sweet fruits like annoying flies. Jaina's mouth twisted, and Xavier said that you can't compare people to flies. In a cold tone, Cassia said that it was just an expression, and that her brother should be more understanding of people, since she was worried about him. Xavier, who had previously beamed under Jaina's sweet words, became embarrassed and wondered why his sister was shaming him so much. He told her to stop talking nonsense. Their father was waiting for them. Cassia decided that for this occasion she had made it clear enough to Jaina that she would not give up her brother so easily. However, Jaina was supposed to win this fight. Moreover, she was determined to play the long game, which Cassia did not yet know. Nevertheless, the girl was determined to figure out the plans of this unpleasant person. Her brother continued to be indignant and said why she was telling such nonsense in front of others. She made him feel ashamed. Cassia suddenly declared that he had no understanding of people at all, and that he should listen to her so as not to regret it later. The brother was surprised. He asked what it meant. He could not forget the warm feeling he experienced when communicating with this pleasant lady. And Jaina, left alone in the garden, thought that something was wrong. Cassia has really changed a lot. However, she was still no match for her. Jaina had very strong cards in her hand and she would not back down. She remembered that she hadn't liked aristocrats from the very beginning. They were so proud and arrogant, yet they often pretended to care about the poor. Jaina met Cassia when she was still a child. She was walking with her friends. They were discussing something when they suddenly bumped into Jaina, who was carrying a bag of rotten apples. For her, it was a treasure, a hope to have a snack and not die of hunger. However, the girls behaved arrogantly. They despised commoners. One of them noticed that Jaina was eating a rotten apple. It was said so arrogantly. But this wasn't what really irritated the beggar. She was already used to it, and it was a normal thing. But that day, she heard false words of sympathy. Cassia came to her and asked if everything was okay with her. The other girls shouted at her not to come closer. She could get infected from this beggar. But Cassia said that the girl was not fair, especially since it was their fault that she fell. And she looked at her with such a sympathetic and pitiful look, after which she said that if she was hungry, let her come to them, to the house of Duke Hall. And then Jaina hated her. These words and participation made her more humiliated than ever. She couldn't forget them. She wanted to make her regret that she dared to humiliate and pity her. At that moment, the father was talking to his son over a cup of tea in the living room. He asked if he was really going to give the stone to the Lord of the Magic Tower. He noted that it was rather strange to pass on the family religion to a stranger. At that moment, Cassia came in and asked if he was really going to seriously think about this proposal. Her father was surprised by her question, but she asked if he had already met the ruler of the Magic Tower. He replied that he had seen him yesterday in the palace, and he again spoke about the protective stone, saying that it could explode due to long neglect and that the ruler must personally guard it. Cassia understood perfectly well that the master of the Magic Tower clearly did not care about them. There was another reason. Because none of the previous rulers of the Magic Tower had questioned the properties of the stone, the father replied that this was indeed so, but he could not ignore the danger. Cassia said that she would then meet with the ruler herself, deciding to do this immediately. In her past life, she had never met the master of the Magic Tower, and she couldn't understand why he was so obsessed with the guard stone. As she walked into his office, she was determined that she would not let him get his way. He greeted her graciously, stating that he had not been expecting her. Having introduced himself and called himself Moreni Marsal, the bishop said that it was unnecessary for her to give her name. He knew who she was. He didn't expect to see a lady from the Hall House in the Magic Tower. After that, he asked why she was looking for him, and whether it was really about the stone. Then a spark of hope appeared in his eyes. He asked if perhaps she had come to answer his proposal to the Duke. Cassia looked straight at him and said that he was right. It was about this topic, but she had to say it straight out. The girl said that they were not going to hand over the protective stone to the master. She also noted that she had heard that if left unattended, it would eventually explode, which was dangerous. However, for more than 100 years, no one ever experienced any strangeness or symptoms. She noted that she herself had often come into contact with the stone, but was completely healthy, after which she asked what the master was afraid of. He noted that one should not underestimate the power contained within the guard stone just because it was not visible. Perhaps it was sealed during its transmission, or the stone itself had sealed it due to long-term neglect. However, if the power suddenly breaks out, the owner will be dealt a fatal blow. and then it will lose its power and collapse, because before it became the Hall family heirloom, it was kept in the palace and checked every 10 years. And this speaks of his sensitivity. If the protective stone that was once a symbol of the empire is damaged due to poor storage, it will deal a blow to their family. It was clear that the master was trying to pressure her. He asked if she could take on such responsibility. Cassia replied that she was more concerned about not violating the trust of the imperial family, since it would be wrong to hand over their gift to a stranger because of an unconfirmed hypothesis. The master realized that she doubted his intentions, but some kind of magical energy emanated from her. On the one hand, her distrust was unpleasant. On the other hand, he suddenly realized that the girl possessed a certain power. He cleared his throat and asked if she had ever used magic. The question hung in the silence, as if even the fans on the chandelier had stopped working. Cassia asked what he meant. He noted that she had a talent for magic, and would she like to become his apprentice and learn these abilities? The turn of events was completely unexpected. She remembered that he accused her of black magic and ruined her life last time. Why did he offer her to study this time? She laughed and said that she had to refuse such an offer, that she had neither talent nor interest. He shifted from one foot to the other and told her to think about it calmly when she returned home. He was ready to guarantee her talent. If she changes her mind about the Aura Stone, he is ready to hear it at any time. His gaze was so piercing that it even gave her goosebumps. She was a little confused on the way home. She thought that he just wanted to persuade her to give him the Aura Stone. Did he not understand that she did not see his intentions? Cassia decided that she had to warn her father and brother not to fall for his tricks. The next day, the weather was beautiful, and Cassia was looking forward to it. The Crown Prince made an appointment with her, but for some reason he was late. The girl walked through the imperial garden, thinking that he was acting as usual. It was always like this. He made the appointments himself. He was late himself, and it seemed that this was the order of things. She walked through the garden, enjoying the good weather, touching the branches of the trees. Every step she took in shoes that walked on green grass, not snow, was a celebration. However, she did not notice that while she was walking, she had entered someone else's territory. It wasn't that she was a stranger, it was just that she had taken the same walks before and never met anyone. And now she saw the sleeping Duke Kane, who did not expect at all that someone had disturbed his peace. She looked at him and didn't understand. He looked so serene, but why was he here? She should have left quickly, but for some reason she was afraid to disturb him. The light was too bright. How could he even sleep with the sun so bright? However, it was clear that he was truly serene perhaps after the north. Everything here seemed cozy to him. Looking at him sleeping, Cassia suddenly thought that for a warrior he looked very handsome. She reached out to simply brush a strand of hair from his face, keeping it out of his eyes. However, at that very moment she felt that Duke Kane's reaction was fully justified by his heroic deeds. He grabbed her hand abruptly, although before that he looked completely asleep. Embarrassed and confused by the surprise, Cassia said that she just wanted the hanging strand to get out of his way. After this, she asked him to let go of her hand. He immediately apologized, saying that he was used to being on his guard. Well, at that moment, naturally, Delhi appeared, who should have appeared a long time ago, and then such a situation would not have even arisen. He asked what she was doing here, but she didn't even have a single normal argument. Delius asked why they were together. Cassia replied that she was just out for a walk, and that his lordship was there, realizing that now this young man could draw the wrong conclusions. However, Duke Kane said that the lady almost fell and he supported her. He looked at her so calmly with his green eyes that it was impossible to doubt his words. Inwardly, Cassia thought about it and even blushed, thinking that it was so nice when a man covered her. Delhi replied that then everything was clear, but told her to be careful. After which Duke Kane stated that he had to apologize and leave. They could continue the conversation. It was very tactful of him and very nice. Then he left. Cassia thought that he was stern and very suspicious. She had to be careful when following him. She wanted to get him as an ally, but she still didn't understand how to do this. While drinking tea with her fiancé, she noticed that there would soon be a ball at the Imperial Palace. And she remembered that after the ball there would be a hunting tournament, and it was then that rumors spread that the Duke was carried away by a dissolute life. And it seems that because of this he does not plan to return to the north. Apparently Cassia was very upset because the groom called out to her. He said that she was behaving rather strangely, silent all day. She said she remembered her brother talking about the hunting tournament. He was so determined to win this year. The Crown Prince laughed and said that it would be very difficult. No one can compare to Uncle in archery. Cassia smiled indulgently, saying that one could never be sure until the competition. The prince was surprised that she was really interested in hunting, and then asked if perhaps she should send an invitation so that she could come and see. She thanked him and said that it would be very nice, and thought to herself that if there was an opportunity, she would try hunting herself. After this, the prince asked her if she would like to be her partner at the ball in 2 days. It's so interesting, he had the same green eyes as his uncle, but they didn't have the courage, audacity, and experience that Cain had. Cassia suddenly thought that if she were with Delius, people would surround them and there would be chaos. And then she wouldn't be able to stop Jaina from getting closer to her brother, and anyway, she didn't like it. She didn't want to appear with the prince at official events. Well, who is she to refuse the heir to the throne? After she agreed, he laughed and said that she was the only one who was right for him. At this time in the imperial palace, the head of state was busy with his own affairs. He was busy drawing up a number of documents when he was informed that Duke Cain had arrived. He ordered him to come in. He needed to discuss something today. In secular clothes, he certainly looked quite imposing. There was no denying that. He said that he had come with an important question. The emperor understood everything and asked if he had really come to ask permission to return to the north. Cain answered in the affirmative. The monsters were temporarily suppressed, but they could appear again at any moment, so he would like to return. The emperor said that he understood his intention, but they needed to discuss something important. Turning to the window, the emperor said that many nobles had expressed dissatisfaction and negativity because of the war. They have been investing a lot of money in it for many years, but the success is small, and if this continues, the treasury may collapse. After which she said that it is known from the records of the ancestors that not all monsters are beasts. Their leadership elite possesses intelligence. The Duke couldn't argue with that. He said that it was true. The monsters looked like wolves, but they were known for their cruelty and rage. They can walk on 2 legs. These are the so-called intelligent monsters. In fact, they are similar to people, but there are differences. They have sharp fangs and claws, and some of them practice black magic. And they live in the forest of Urton in the north of the Audrey Empire. The Duke noted that despite their intelligence, they were no less dangerous than monsters and needed to be fought. However, the emperor was of a different mind since they were intelligent. Perhaps it was worth trying to come to an agreement. Duke Cain, who spent many years there, said it was a bit of a surprise. The emperor tried to calm him down, saying that he understood how hard it was to send only soldiers to their deaths for the sake of the empire, but now there was a good plan. They wanted to try it, so he shouldn't argue. This decision was made after long discussions with the nobles. The emperor patted him on the shoulder and said that he believed that he would be able to understand him, like his brother. He realized that it was useless to argue with the emperor and said that he agreed, deciding that he would try to convince him later. Clenching his fist, he tried to contain his anger. The next day, everyone was getting ready for the ball. The maid looked at her mistress with admiration and said that she was simply magnificent. This outfit was indeed even better than the previous one, but Cassia only laughed. She poked her maid in the forehead and said that she had enough of flattering her. Was she really ready to say that even in rags her mistress would be beautiful? She, with all her devotion, declared that it would be so, and even offered to try. Cassia ordered the dress to be sent to the Duke's house, and the seamstress immediately agreed. The maid asked her lady if she was going to return to the castle right away, and she said that she wanted to rest. At that moment they heard a voice. Someone was telling them not to move. If they didn't want to be able to die, they had to obey. At that moment they saw a little girl who was resisting, but she was being dragged by grown men. She was screaming that when her brother returned, he would deal with them. One man asked if the other would sell it to him or not, and he said, of course. The girl resisted with all her might, and the man raised his hand to her and told her to calm down. Cassia couldn't help but shout enough. She said that the girl should be released immediately. The men saw the daughter of a noble family. The seller said that they already had an agreement to sell this girl to Baron Henry. Cassia thought for a moment and asked if they remembered that illegal human trafficking was punishable by death. The man replied that the girl was his slave and it was a fair deal. At that moment the girl screamed that it was not true. They had kidnapped her. Cassia casually remarked that Baron Henry didn't remember that it was time for him to pay off his debt to their ducal house. The man who was going to buy the girl suddenly realized that she was from the Hall house. He immediately decided not to get involved in these problems and said that he didn't mean anything bad, he was just passing by and ran away. Cassia laughed and said, "The customer has left. What does the merchant intend to do now?" He declared that he would go his own way, at which time Cassia turned to the girl and asked her name and where her home was. She replied that her name was Ella. She didn't have a home, only a brother. His name was Ian Andrea. He worked for Duke Kane and promised to return today. Cassia was stunned. Could her brother really be Kane's closest ally, his bodyguard and loyal friend? What was interesting was that in the past he betrayed Kane. At the same time, he himself became a hero. Having exposed his conspiracy, Cassia thought about what to do with his sister, who thanked her now and said that she would repay her. The girl, confused, asked why her brother hadn't come for a long time, and Cassia said that she thought she knew where he was. After that, she offered to take her to him, realizing that now was the time to make allies. And they went with the girl to Duke Kane's castle. Looking around, Cassia decided that the castle was simply stunning, and at first glance it seemed like a magnificent gift for the Duke. However, in reality, it was a luxury prison to keep him under surveillance. Thanks to this, the Emperor could control him and monitor his every move. At this time, Ian Andrea, Ella's brother, was running towards them. He called her loudly, exclaiming where she was. He searched for her for a long time, but she was not with Grandma Susan. The girl replied that her grandmother had died. She waited at home, but then some people burst in and said that her grandmother owed them money and took her away, declaring that they would sell her. He remarked that it was unlikely that his grandmother could have borrowed money from such people, but at that moment Cassia intervened and said that falsification of promissory notes was quite common. At that moment, Ella drew her brother's attention to Cassia and said that she had saved her and brought her here. The man immediately bowed and said that he was very grateful for his sister's help, but Cassia told him not to worry. He decided that he had frightened her with his rough manners because he had spent many years on the battlefield. Cassia said that it was okay, then asked if he served Duke Kane. He replied that they lost their parents early and were left with large debts, and the geologist helped him. He not only paid off their debts, but also gave them the opportunity to serve the country, leaving the slums. The man said that they owed a huge debt to the Duke, as he had given them the opportunity to start a new life. Cassia felt genuine gratitude from him, so she was surprised how he would eventually betray the Duke. However, looking at happy Ella, she suddenly realized that family was the most important thing for him. Then everything fell into place. This was his vulnerable spot. Most likely he was being blackmailed. And the Seldry family was probably behind this, and Jaina definitely had a hand in it. The young man once again thanked Cassia for saving his sister, and then asked if he could repay her in any way. Cassia smiled and said that there was actually one thing to do. The young man happily said that he was ready to do everything possible. His request surprised him a little. Cassia asked him to teach her horse riding and archery. The brother and sister were amazed. They did not think that a girl from a noble family wanted to learn such arts. Cassia said that she would like to invite a teacher to the castle, but her family considers it dangerous. If there is an opportunity to study with him in secret, she will be very grateful. Ian said that he would be happy to help her. He would organize everything. Cassia learned to ride as a child, but stopped after a fall. But to protect herself and her family, she had to return to it and wanted to prove herself in the hunting tournament. She also thought that by talking to Ian, she would be able to learn more about the Duke. And then he will be able to understand the reasons for his betrayal of the Emperor. Subsequently, when she was at a reception at the Imperial Palace, she did not see her father and brother. Knowing that they were most likely at a reception with the head of state, she thought that she needed to keep a closer eye on Xavier. She also knew she needed to change her reputation before it was too bad. In the past, due to her shy nature, Cassia did not interact with other ladies. She thought that if the Crown Prince was by her side, she wouldn't have to worry about anything else. But then Jaina spread rumors and people started avoiding her. Meanwhile, Jaina herself left the impression of a sweet and modest lady. Cassia was determined that she would play by her rules from now on. She heard the girls telling Jaina that she looked great today. She pretended to be modestly embarrassed. The girls did not fail to notice how modest and sweet she was, after which they added that Lady Hall could succeed. Jaina pretended to be upset and said that Cassia was just a little arrogant, but she was not a bad person, and the girls were amazed at how protective she was of Lady Hall. However, at that moment they heard Cassia ask what they were talking about. The girls couldn't help but greet her, but the tension was palpable. Nevertheless, Cassia was determined to change her destiny, and it was time to start doing so. Jaina wondered why she had suddenly become so active. She was usually quiet and alone. However, she extended her hand and asked if this was Lady Erica Colpin, then remarked that the dress suited her very well. The girl thanked him and asked what had made her finally speak up, as she was usually aloof. Cassia replied that she was a bit shy and had hesitated to approach, but now she would like to talk to the ladies and asked if they would accept her into their circle. Jaina decided to extend her hand first so that the girls would remember, but she thought to herself that today was with Cassia. She noticed that they were all fascinated by her and said that they should all forget about her previous indifference. However, Cassia looked her boldly in the eyes and asked why she was saying that. She noticed that she could not ignore such wonderful ladies. Why such a biased opinion? Did she really seem impolite to them? And continuing her game, she said that she seemed to have accidentally insulted them and created misunderstandings, after which she asked for forgiveness for her behavior. Then she turned to Jaina and asked her to refrain from saying anything that might be misunderstood, noting that she was certainly not as good as Lady Seldry and had a lot to learn. The girls were surprised, not understanding how she could be inferior to Lady Jaina, and they made her become even more gloomy by declaring that she was the best among them here. Then Cassia said that it seemed like they had exhausted the topic, they should forget everything and start being friends. So Jaina found herself out of work, but Cassia thought that this was not the end. She would reveal her true nature to everyone. She herself felt that everything was changing, but she did not understand why. At that moment it was announced that His Imperial Majesty had arrived. He came down to the guests, accompanied by his son, who was Cassia's fiancé. Everyone bowed their heads respectfully. The emperor had very high authority among his citizens. However, the first thing he immediately asked was where Cain was now. Someone said that they had seen him recently, but the Duke himself immediately appeared and said hello. He walked with a confident, upright gait, and his secular clothes looked quite harmonious on him. At that moment, the girls started whispering and said that he was even better than they said. It's not for nothing that they call him the god of war, by the way. He was not married yet. The emperor noticed that this ball was prepared for him, but he arrived last. The Duke apologized and said that he was not accustomed to such events, but the emperor noted that it was no more difficult than on the battlefield. Cain realized that he intended to keep him here in the capital. Looking at them, Cassia realized that he was uncomfortable in society when there were so many aristocrats around. At that moment, the crown prince called her loudly. He came up to her and said that she looked absolutely stunning today. Cassia thanked him and asked if he shouldn't be next to the emperor. He replied that today's hero was his uncle, so everything was fine. He wanted to be her first dance partner. Cassia asked, somewhat puzzled, if he had seen her brother. Delius replied that he was with his father and must now be with the emperor. Just when Cassia thought that the main thing was not with Jaina, the prince extended his hand to her and invited her to dance. One thing she simply had no right to do was refuse her fiancé. She smiled sweetly and accepted the invitation. It was necessary to demonstrate to the whole society that she was the prince's bride. At that moment, everyone looked at her carefully, noting that they were quite a beautiful couple. Cassia heard whispers that she would soon become the bride of the crown prince. However, she knew that there were still many obstacles ahead. At that moment, Jaina stood as if all the storm clouds had gathered around her, but she heard the voice of the tower master. He asked if she would just stand and watch. After which he added that he came to check how she was fulfilling her promise. It seemed that the situation was unsuccessful for her. A dark light lit up Jaina's eyes and she said that she still had many trump cards. Everyone in the hall was dancing and enjoying the pleasant music. The crown prince danced with his bride, but did not feel his father's disapproving glances. Standing next to his brother, he noticed that instead of being with his uncle, he was simply dancing with a girl. Cain noted that today was a holiday, so let him enjoy the day. The king noted with displeasure that at his age, Cain himself was only engaged in fencing and studying. Even the late king scolded him for this. The duke noticed that his majesty was too kind to him, but he was only trying to be like his brother. Afterwards, he noticed that the late king had repeatedly told him that he should become the emperor's right hand and help him, so he could not allow himself to relax. However, he noted that in the end, it did not live up to his expectations. Cain thanked the emperor for his concern, saying that he understood how difficult it was to accept him after what his mother had done. The emperor asked why he suddenly started talking about this, after which he said that it was not his fault. The death of the queen was a long time ago, all this was in the past, so it was time to forget. The duke said that they would follow his advice, but it was strange this was the first time the emperor had reacted like this. After that, he remembered the letter he had recently received and thought that its contents were true. At this point the music ended, and the prince tried to persuade Cassia to give him one more dance. However, she had to find her brother, so she said that she was a little tired and wanted to rest. He let go of her hand and she thanked him sincerely. Cassia thought to herself that she hadn't seen Jaina since the middle of the evening. Had she really already met her brother? She approached Lady Erica and asked if she had seen her brother and Jaina. The girl replied that it seemed they were heading towards the garden. Cassia realized that she was late. Walking through the garden, she couldn't find them anywhere. However, at that moment she heard someone call her name. It was the Tower Master. She asked how he could refuse here. After all, he had never attended such events before, but he noticed that if the king invited him, he was obliged to come. Then he asked if she had thought about his offer to become his student. Cassia clasped her hands and said that she had already refused last time. Was he not listening to her? He replied that maybe she had changed her mind since then, and he was ready to wait as long as necessary. At that moment, they suddenly heard someone talking. Someone was saying that the emperor was too merciful that he left the duke alive. He should have been expelled from the palace, like his wicked mother. Another noted that, apparently due to several victories in the north, the emperor changed his attitude towards his brother. They said that the duke might be normal on the outside, but inside he was as dark as the late queen. Cassia thought that was too cruel. How could they mock a man who saved their country at the cost of his life? However, at that moment, one of the interlocutors spilled wine from his glass. He didn't understand what happened, but he felt as if someone had pushed him. The glass broke. One said that perhaps it was simply defective. However, right then, the second glass burst in the hands of the other interlocutor. The speakers suddenly looked at each other in fear and realized that they had to run. They ran from the garden screaming about a ghost, and Cassia heard a quiet laugh. The Tower Lord laughed at that moment and said that magic could be so useful. Did Cassia really not change her mind? She was surprised that he used his gift, but he stated that for such cases, there is nothing better than magic. Then he noticed that she had obvious talent, but Cassia turned around and said that she was not going to learn it. She apologized, said that she didn't have time and went to look for her brother. The master thought to himself that he hoped that at least Jaina would not disappoint him. At this moment, she was busy lassoing Xavier. In a gentle and sweet voice, she said that it was time for her to go and expressed hope for the next meeting. She handed him her handkerchief, which was like a symbol of her affection. At that moment, Xavier heard his sister call out to him. She asked if he had already met Jaina. He, holding a handkerchief in his hands, said that she turned out to be such a kind and beautiful girl. Cassia remembered that after he received the handkerchief last time, he completely lost his head over Jaina. To his sister's reasonable remark, he replied that her suspicions were groundless, that Jane was capable of bad things. Cassia remembered everything and couldn't understand, because he didn't know her at all. Why was he already protecting her? She was suffocating, as if in a dream. She had already thought that maybe she should tell him that she had returned in time, but that was impossible. So she decided to explain it more simply, and said that the matter was that Jaina was spreading bad rumors about her among the other ladies. That's why she tries to stay away from her. It was true, she wasn't lying. Xavier noticed that it was now clear why she was so cold towards her. Cassia said that it was shameful, so she asked not to tell anyone about it. Then she said that if he still liked Jaina, there was nothing she could do. She had to go. This maneuver was successful. Now her brother looked at the scarf no longer with such an impression. At that moment, another conversation was going on in the garden. Duke Kane was asking Lady Selena for help. She replied that she had to repay him for saving her brother's life on the battlefield. This was Selena Anderson. Her interlocutor reminded her that the investigation into the false accusations against his mother must be conducted in complete secrecy. She replied that she understood everything perfectly well and would not talk about it. He understood that he had to find out the whole truth, because all his life he had been considered guilty of the Queen's behavior. However, at that moment they looked back because they heard someone's footsteps. Cassia wandered around the garden in complete thought, not understanding how to get out of this situation. After all, if her brother doesn't listen to her even after all this, what should she do then? They're all lost. She was so lost in thought that she didn't look where she was going and ended up tripping over a stone. The last thing she needed now was to break her face. She was already flying down when she suddenly felt someone catch her. Cassia turned around and looked. She did not expect to see this man nearby. Duke Kane was very agile and easily caught her, saving her from an unexpected fall. Cassia was surprised, and this pulled her out of her thoughts. The night was very warm for the holiday. The sky was practically open to the shining of the stars. Cassia thanked the Duke. He asked if she was okay. She absent-mindedly replied that she was. He noticed her anxiety and asked what happened. She said that everything was fine. She just had a little fight with her brother. Kane noted that quarreling is only possible if the relationship is close enough. However, misunderstandings can usually be easily resolved through conversation. Cassia was surprised at how reasonable he was in his approach to the matter. She asked that it seemed like a lifelong experience. Kane thought it was strange that every time he saw her, she reacted as if she already knew him well, although they were complete strangers. He noted that in her condition it would be difficult to dance. Maybe she should return home. She wondered if she had said goodbye to Delhi yet, and whether she should go back. Just as she was about to head towards the ballroom, she twisted her ankle again. Kane's reaction was lightning fast. He grabbed her immediately, after which he said that this was no good. He would walk her to the entrance. And he said that he would send someone to inform His Highness that she had left, and that it would be better for her to return and rest. Cassia was grateful to him for his participation, but noted that he was expected and should return quickly. For the first time during their conversation, he gave an interesting smile and said that she was too harsh with her level of insight. It should have been clear to her that he avoided such events. Cassia realized that she had almost given herself away again and should keep her mouth shut. She blushed so sweetly that her cheeks turned red, which attracted the Duke's attention. He smiled in a childish way, and that smile suited him very well. Then he added that he was just joking when he extended his hand to her in farewell. As the carriage drove away, he thought that she was certainly perceptive, but still seemed a little naive. And Cassia, sitting in the carriage, suddenly felt that she liked his touch. There was some kind of warmth emanating from him, and her heart seemed to come alive. She realized that he was not as cold-blooded as she had previously thought. However, why then did he betray the Emperor? This worried her greatly. She wondered if her brother would be able to let go of his feelings for Jaina, since she had told him everything so clearly. At that moment, she felt her ankle twist again. However, then she felt some kind of spark in her hand, and her cup simply flew into the air. It was as if some kind of energy flow had rushed into her hand and spun it around. This wasn't just a sloppiness, it was as if something magical had happened. She watched the cup fly off and couldn't understand what was happening at all. At that moment, the door to the room opened slightly and the maid asked what had happened. Standing next to the broken cup, Cassia couldn't explain it even to herself. The maid suddenly asked worriedly if everything was all right with her lady, and Cassia remembered that the same flow came from the Master of Magic. Looking at her hand, she did not understand how she could do this, what had awakened in her. The next day, she was at Duke Kane's estate and wondered if she really did have a magical gift. All night long, she tried again to lift the cup into the air, but nothing worked. It was just a waste of time that she broke the cup and tired out her maids. Cassia didn't know if it was magic or not, but she definitely wouldn't become the Tower Lord's apprentice. At that moment, she heard Ella greet her loudly. The girl was glad to see her. She looked much happier than the previous time. The girl brought a pie in a basket, saying that she made it for her, hoping that she would like it. She said that thanks to the lady she was now safe and would come often, as she lived near the duchy. Cassia was very excited to start shooting lessons. However, she still continued to surprise her brother and sister. The girl said that she did not expect the Duke to provide her with a place to study. It was unexpected. She understood that the Duke would be informed anyway, but she didn't think that he would allocate a quiet place on his estate. And Ian said that the Duke asked me to give her something that should help with the swelling. Cassia smiled and said that she would definitely have to thank him when she saw him. She was pleased with such attention. Ian said that His Majesty asked to train her with complete devotion. He also learned to shoot from the Duke and noticed that he had outstanding skills. He probably studied under the former emperor from early childhood. Here, Ian blurted out and said, while his mother, however, immediately stopped and fell silent. Cassia asked what was wrong with his mother. He replied that he definitely didn't know anything, after which he suggested starting the lesson. The girl wondered what secrets the Duke's mother might have had. All she knew was that she had been deposed for betraying her family. Moreover, this seemed to have happened at the ball, but for some reason she felt it was better not to show curiosity. Sometime later, the girls were sitting at tea, and someone asked if Lady Erica had invited Cassia too. The girl replied that this was true. She promised that she would come. However, she was still missing, and Jaina decided to take advantage of the opportunity. She said that perhaps she changed her mind at the last moment, and she said that it was just like her, she often does that. Celine suggested that perhaps something had happened on the way, but Jaina countered and said that Cassia was generally difficult to communicate with. And another girl whispered that Cassia was known for being picky. Lady Selene was new in town, so it was unlikely that she knew about it. However, at that moment the butler came and announced that Lady Hall had arrived. She was wearing a wonderful summer dress and immediately apologized because she had been delayed while choosing a gift. The girls said that there was nothing wrong with her being late. The fact that she came is already good. Everyone expressed joy at her appearance. Only Jaina sat and thought about how quickly everyone had changed their attitude towards her. And in general, she somehow changed. What happened was completely unclear. At this point, Cassia turned to Lady Celine and said that they had not met before. The girl introduced herself, saying that she had recently arrived in the capital. Cassia asked what the girls were talking about, to which he received an unexpected answer. Lady Selena noted that Lady Hall and Lady Seldry seemed to be on friendly terms with each other. Cassia decided not to follow Jaina's plan and asked if they were close. All the girls at the table were shocked. They were all sure that they were friends. Lady Selena realized that it would be fun and prepared for an interesting tea party. Cassia said that she and Jaina had only seen each other a couple of times, and that she had been sitting at home with books the whole time, so she didn't know anything. Then she added that it turns out that spending time with other ladies is pleasant. One of the girls said that it was very strange. Jaina said that they were friends. Selena suggested that they all be friends together, since that was not the case. And so she decided to smooth things over a little in order to get to know Lady Hall better. She expressed the hope that they would see each other often, and it would be nice if she could be shown around like a new girl. Cassia thought she was a very nice lady. She even managed to clear the atmosphere that had been spoiled from her. Looking at her, she thought that if she had started going to meetings earlier, she probably would have made a friend. One of the girls said that she knew a lot of good places and suggested going there together. Jaina realized that everything was not going according to her plan at all. Then she asked where Lady Hall had gone after dancing with the prince at the ball. She noticed that Cassia had disappeared, and he had been looking for her for a long time. Had they really had a fight? The move was certainly reasonable. Jaina pretended to stir her tea slowly, as if she was genuinely expressing concern. She asked what they had quarreled about. Let Cassia at least tell them. She thought that the meeting couldn't go without gossip. She had already gotten out of the habit of it, and realized that Jaina probably made up the same things about others. Cassia decided that she needed to answer urgently, said that she was just tired, and Delia suggested that she rest a little. Lady Erica saw this too. Then she made a move towards Jaina and said that she had given the handkerchief to her brother that evening, and asked if Marquis Jeff had the same handkerchief. The blow hit its target. Jaina was stunned, but she had no plans to give up. She wondered how Cassia could have known this, whether the Marquis had shown it to everyone. Cassia continued that she was surprised by the strange way the Marquis looked at Jaina, then laughed and said that she knew there was something between them. She turned out to be quite observant, but the girls immediately said that the headscarf had a special meaning for women in Audrey's empire. If she gives a handkerchief, it means she gives her heart, and Marquis Jeff is almost 40. Besides, he is a married man. Why was it necessary to give him such a thing? Jaina calmed down her excitement and said that Cassia must have mixed something up. These scarves are completely ordinary if someone has them. It does not necessarily mean that Jaina gave it to him, and Cassia asked, which means she admits that she gave the scarf to her brother. If she is not mistaken, at one of the previous receptions she also presented a gift with a handkerchief to some gentleman. I think it was Count Gustav. The girls asked who this guy was and what kind of reception they were talking about. Everyone suddenly realized that Jaina was pleased with the amorous girl and was throwing handkerchiefs left and right. She couldn't control herself and jumped up, knocked over the cup, and screamed at Cassia. However, she immediately realized her mistake. Lady Hall gave her a cold look and said that there was no need to speak so loudly. She simply decided to respond in her own spirit, with the same cheap trick that Jaina loved to use. Lady Seldry decided to shift the focus and asked if Cassia really wanted to ruin Lady Erica's tea party today. However, the hostess herself said that it was unimportant. It was much more important to dispel the misunderstandings associated with Lady Seldry. She noticed that even the servant who was always next to her was looking at his mistress so strangely, almost furtively. Jaina felt like she was about to explode, and it showed in her eyes. Lady Erica, seeing this, wondered if she had said something wrong. Cassia noted that Lady Seldry really needed to be more careful because they were worried about her reputation. If there was a scandal, it would be bad for her family, after which she expressed hope that she would explain everything clearly to everyone and to her brother too. Jaina sarcastically remarked that she was very grateful for the concern, almost to the point of touching. However, she could no longer restrain herself and realized that it was better for her to leave now. One of the girls tried to stop her, but she headed towards the exit with a determined step. Selena said that let her go, it would probably be better that way. And Cassia, calmly sipping her tea, thought that he should just try to touch her brother one more time. Later that day, Cassia was looking for her father. The servant replied that he was in the office on the second floor with the young master. Cassia approached the door and heard her father say that the emperor, on the advice of Duke Seldry, was going to negotiate with the tribe of magical creatures. The girl was about to knock but decided to listen a little longer. The brother asked if his father had really agreed, and he replied that it was impossible to convince the emperor. He said that war meant suffering for the people, and he would entrust the negotiations to the Grand Duke. If they succeed, the Duke's northern troops will be useless, and if anything goes wrong, the responsibility will fall on him. Cain ends up in a terribly awkward position, and it's unclear whether the emperor is doing this on purpose. Once upon a time, the late emperor overthrew the empress and exiled the Grand Duke to the north, but then it was the only way to save his life. Cassia wondered how much her father knew about how Cain's own mother had become the folded empress. She knew little about all this, only that there was evidence of her betrayal and an attempt to kill the emperor, but everyone involved was either dead or had disappeared without a trace. But the emperor doesn't want anyone to raise this issue, otherwise there will be big trouble. The father told his son not to talk about this matter anymore, and Cassia thought that perhaps that was where it all started, with the story with Cain's mother. It was then that the Duke became a traitor, which led to the downfall of not only his family, but also hers. Sitting in her room in front of the mirror, she thought that she needed to protect her family. She had already replaced the stone in her father's office with a fake, so she could breathe a sigh of relief. However, she had a bad feeling about why the Master of Magic needed this stone. Maybe he was strengthening his power in this way. At that moment, Cassia heard a knock on the door. Her brother asked for permission to come in. He said they needed to talk. Cassia noted that if he wanted to apologize, then there was no need. She was already feeling better. He asked if she was still angry about the ball, and she replied that it wasn't his fault. Brother started to say that he didn't know what had happened between him and Jaina, but Cassia noted that interesting rumors would be circulating around the city tomorrow, and then they would talk. The next day, Cassia was eagerly awaiting her brother's arrival from the city, and as soon as he appeared, she immediately went down to him to find out if he had managed to learn any new rumors. She asked her brother directly about this, quite sure that Jaina's true face had been revealed and that now the lady would certainly discuss her. However, the brother hesitated and said that he had heard some things, of course, but he didn't think that she would be proud of it. Scratching his head, the brother asked if Cassia really practiced magic. Rumors had spread throughout the city that she was a witch. Damn it, Cassia thought, what does this all mean? In fact, everything changed the previous night when Jaina was breaking the dishes. She stood in front of the mirror and couldn't believe how Cassia dared to disgrace her. Grabbing the vase of flowers in her hands, she wanted to throw it at the floor, but looked back at the voice. Her sister said that this was too much. In public, Jaina was an angel in a dress, but at home she destroyed everything she saw. The girl suddenly became frightened and said that she had accidentally dropped the previous vase and was just about to ask the servants to remove it. After that, she said that if it wasn't an urgent matter, maybe they should talk later. The sister asked who she was to tell her what to do if it weren't for her father. This commoner would have been sorting through trash somewhere long ago. Jaina hesitated and asked, calling the girl's sister, "What kind of joke is this?" She replied that there were no jokes. Everything was very serious. She asked what had happened to Jaina's behavior, if it weren't for her insight, what kind of wild thing she had done at the tea party today. Afterwards, she said that she had resolved the situation that had happened today and was able to stop the spread of rumors thanks to her connections with influential women. She couldn't allow some beggar to spread dirty rumors about their family, so she asked how Jaina planned to thank her for that. She almost exploded, but the sister, who for now has to do the dirty work that her father has entrusted to her, will pay back later. Jaina thanked her with a stumbling voice, but her sister suddenly turned around and told her to clean up the broken vases herself. There was no point in leaving it to the servants. The Duke's stepdaughter stood there, knowing she was losing. But the dirty rumors no longer threatened her, and that was already something. But she could not forgive Cassia that because of her, she had to endure such humiliation. She trampled the shards of the vase, imagining how she was destroying her rival. However, at that moment her eyes lit up, which meant that she was about to have a vision. Channeling her power, she suddenly found herself in Cassia's room. And I saw her practicing with a cup, and then I saw exactly what she needed. The cup of tea simply floated in front of her, and she managed to see the surprised face of her rival. This was just what she needed. This was what she was missing. However, Jaina realized that her vision was becoming blurry, her ability to foresee was weakening, she needed to hurry. But now the main thing was to discredit Cassia. She was clearly using magic, and an aura of darkness emanated from her, although Jaina did not know whether the vision was about the recent past or the distant past. At least the fact that magic is being used remains unchanged, which means she can talk about it. At that moment, the maid came and asked if she had called her. She told her to spread rumors that Cassia was using dark magic, telling the servants and aristocrats to tell it. At the same time, she allowed her to exaggerate it as she wanted. It would only be beneficial. Standing in the forest, preparing for archery practice, Cassia thought that the head of the magic tower had never spread rumors so quickly before. She couldn't understand what had changed. At that moment, a confused Ella approached her and greeted her. She asked if she knew about the rumors that said she was a dark sorceress. Ella said emotionally that such rumors cannot be believed and that something must be done to stop their spread. However, Cassia stopped her and asked if she really believed in her that much. The girl immediately said that if Lady Cassia says it is not so, then it is so. The girl felt pleased that someone believed in her so much and cared about her. It was like balm for her soul. She leaned over to the girl and told her not to worry. She would find whoever was spreading these rumors and deal with him personally. Ella asked if she knew who did it, but she said there was someone who needed to be checked first. That same day, she returned to the master of the magic tower and said that it was time to end this performance. All this time he saw her not as a student, but only as a connection with the magic stone. Did he really think that she would not notice this? The tower master suddenly said that this was a rather strange start to the conversation. Could something have happened? Cassia asked if he would deny that he had spread slander about her just to get the protective stone. She asked how he was different then from the selfish aristocrats whom he himself had recently punished. He noticed that he really wanted to get the stone, but he didn't understand at all what she was talking about. But Cassia had already realized that it wasn't his doing. She said that someone had spread rumors about her in just one night, and the magister chuckled and thought that Lady Jaina must have done something wrong. He felt relieved and said that it was not true and he saw no need for proof. Cassia felt that it really wasn't him. However, the master immediately said that they could not completely dismiss the rumors, and she knew about it too. Cassia thought he knew whose doing it was, and he told her she had her own ways of finding out. But he said he would not pretend not to know about his students' difficulties and extended his hand to her again. She asked if he really thought she would fall for it so easily, and the master remarked that he could teach her a lot. And if his guess is correct, by now she has already realized that she has a power that goes beyond common sense. He said that if she took his hand, he would tell her how to harness this power. Cassia thought that there was an advantage to becoming an archmage's apprentice, then the rumors would disappear on their own, but there was no reason for the greatest wizard in the world to accept a warlock as an apprentice. It would make her life a lot easier, but she had one strange feeling. She thanked him for the offer, but again declined, saying that it was time for her to take her leave. The master told her afterward that in order to find out someone's secret, there are other ways besides magic. However, she did not answer, deciding that it was time to end the conversation. The Tower Lord decided that it seemed she had awakened a power, and in that case she had no choice but to find him again. On the way home, Cassia thought that if his words were true, then someone else was behind these rumors. But she didn't show her power to anyone. She herself didn't really understand it. But she remembered what the Master of Magic had told her at the end, and thought about his words. And then a sudden flash of understanding dawned on her. She knew who had the gift of foresight. It turns out that Jaina was able to figure her out using her abilities. No one else was able to do this, and it turns out that she is the one spreading all the rumors. People gathered in the fencing arena. The competition was about to begin. On this day, all the country's aristocrats were required to attend the event. When Cassia entered the ballroom, she heard whispers all around her, just like in her past life, damn it. She felt that she might not be able to cope with it this time. Because of her sensitivity, she knew what other people thought of her. And it was very, very bad. At that moment, Jaina walked towards her with a loud scream, as if no one had yet heard whether she was practicing black magic. She said that she was very worried about this, so she thought that this year she would not be able to attend the hunting tournament because the crown prince would not invite her. Cassia heard whispers as if in a delirium, people saying, "Isn't it only monsters who can use black magic?" Others responded that people could also awaken it, although it happened extremely rarely. A person must possess hidden powers of darkness. It was said that without the help of representatives of the monster race or a dark magician, it cannot be awakened. There were speculations that Cassia had allied herself with the monsters, so she kept her distance from everyone. She knew she had to say something in her defense. However, at that moment she felt someone take her hand. It was Lady Serena Anderson, whom she had liked so much during tea. People noticed this and started whispering, but Selena didn't pay any attention. She told Cassia that she had enjoyed the last tea party so much. The whole family seemed to love the gift she had given. Then she said that her parents asked her to know more about one incident, how her great-grandfather defended the continent from a race of monsters. Cassia was surprised, because they had only recently met. It was admirable how she dared to step forward and defend her. Lady Selene whispered to her to react with dignity and not make excuses because of empty rumors. The whispers changed. Someone said that if you think about it, the Duchy of Hall played a vital role in the founding of the state. It was ridiculous to even think that the daughter of such a family could use black magic. Besides, the Crown Prince would not have invited her to such an event if it were true. Selena said that she herself saw how quickly people's opinions changed. Cassia thanked her. The lady replied that it was hard for her to watch someone suffer from unfounded rumors. She added the word again. Cassia didn't understand what it meant and asked her again. Selena told her not to pay attention. If she didn't react, everything would calm down in a couple of days. At this point, Jaina clenched her fists, turned around, and realized she needed to implement a different plan. Cassia told Selene that time flies when she talks to her. Here she saw Jaina, who was walking somewhere. Cassia apologized and said that she had urgent business and needed to go. Lady Selena said goodbye to him sweetly, knowing in her heart what was going on. Cassia rushed after Jane, and I have a feeling this will not end well. When she opened the door to the room where Jaina had just entered, she saw something unexpected. First, his brother, who was beaming. And then, as Jaina threw herself on his neck with a hot embrace. All was lost. Cassia simply couldn't believe how he had turned out to be so narrow-minded. And since when did they become so close? Had he already fallen in love with her? He wants to die in this life at the hands of this girl. No, she couldn't leave everything like this. But she couldn't continue to look at it either. She turned around and ran forward, but then someone grabbed her by the arm. It was Deli. She asked if he shouldn't be at the competition now. Then she said that she needed to go urgently, and he asked what matters could be more important than the words of the Crown Prince and her fiancé, in such an icy tone that it made her heart ache. He said that they needed to have a serious talk urgently, after which he pulled her along with him, not giving her the opportunity to say anything. Cassia was surprised by the prince's behavior, but she could not object. She looked at this sweet couple and thought that everything was going completely wrong. But what she heard from her fiancé in the forest was even worse. He said that there were rumors that she was a witch. His mother wanted to break off their engagement. As a result, their marriage contract would be annulled, after which he asked if she was really a witch. Cassia darkened and thought, in this life again, could he really suspect her again? And Deli sharply pulled her back and asked why she was silent, demanding an explanation. Cassia looked at him and thought that he was a great disappointment to her. In a cold tone, she asked if he would believe her if she said no. He believed in baseless rumors and doubted her, just as he now wants her to prove her innocence. He suddenly began to mumble and make excuses, saying that they had to convince His Highness of her innocence, but Cassia interrupted him. She said that she had better go. He made his choice. It started raining and the prince tried to stop her. However, Cassia realized that it was all over. He had betrayed her again. He stood and looked after her, but she understood that such behavior on his part was normal. Most likely it was fate, both in a past life and in this one. However, now she will not cry because of disappointment in him. She will never do that again. At that moment, she heard the noise of some kind of cart and turned around. Someone called her by name. She didn't expect to meet this person here. The young man extended his hand to her and invited her to get into the carriage. It was the Grand Duke Kane. How could he be here? He handed her a handkerchief so that she could wipe the raindrops from her face, and not only that. Kane asked why she was wandering around alone in such a downpour, and whether she had quarreled with His Highness. And then he noticed that his carriage was standing nearby. He involuntarily overheard their conversation, after which he asked if she was okay. She said everything was fine, realizing that she had expected it. Kane noticed that she was the daughter of a noble family, raised in care and prosperity. He thought that it would be difficult for her to cope with such rumors, but she turned out to be stronger than he expected. Cassia felt a trembling in her hands again and squeezed her palm tighter. She asked if his lordship was worried by the rumor that she was a witch. The carriage continued on its way in the pouring rain. However, inside it was dry and even quite warm. The Duke remarked that he had seen many people die because of false rumors. If he so easily believed gossip, how would he then be different from the murderers who had driven others to death? He noticed that he was in the same position as she was. They said about him that he was afraid of the monsters and fled from the battlefield. Cassia didn't expect that there would be such gossip about him, but she remembered something. Rumors that he fled the battlefield began to spread after the hunting tournament, so why are they talking about it now? She suddenly asked him when the tournament would be. He replied that it would be next week. Cassia realized that time had moved forward. During the last tournament, there was panic due to the invasion of monsters. They said that the border had been breached, and the blame was placed on Cain, who had left the front lines. The Emperor, concerned about public opinion, hastily ordered Cain to return north. But for some reason the Duke was stalling. Then rumors began to spread that he had traded the North for a life of luxury. And while saving his own skin, the Duke also became a victim of rumors, and it all started with a hunting tournament. At that moment, the Duke called her name with concern and asked if she was all right. She finally woke up. He said that he called her several times, but she did not answer. What was she thinking about? Cassia said in a trembling voice that she understood that this was an impudent request, but could the Duke refuse to participate in the tournament? He was shocked by such a request, but said that it was the Emperor's order and he could not obey it. Cassia realized that it seemed they had no choice but to push through. The rain continued to fall, turning the magic tower into a rather ominous place. The tower master sat staring at one spot. Jaina worriedly asked why he called her, and he just sits there staring at her, wondering what she did to deserve this. The master asked if she knew how much time had passed. He reminded her that in exchange for the stone she promised to bring him, he agreed to support their family and her place as crown princess. But there has been no news so far, and it seems that this place doesn't interest her that much. Jaina stated that the protective stone is not a vegetable in the marketplace. It needs to show a little patience. The master stated that in that case she would have to speak directly with the Duke, after which he asked her to leave. She twisted her mouth again in that horrible way she always did when she was angry. Jaina knew that all this was happening because of that bitch Cassia. She was the one who was dragging it all out. She always thwarted her plans by getting in her way. Jaina asked the Magister to wait a little longer, saying that now Cassia was completely on her hook, and her brother would soon bring her the stone himself. The Tower Master turned away and said that he was ready to trust her again. However, he reminded her that the stone should be delivered only in the box that he gave her. When asked why this was so, the master replied that he had the ability to sense the owner's will. The stone was kept in the house of the Duke of Hall for a long time and therefore responds to the will of his family. If it is pulled out by force, disaster may occur. Therefore, it is safest to deliver it in a special box. Jaina wondered why the master himself didn't take it away from the Duke's house. Why does he use her in particular? Something is clearly wrong here. The master seemed to hear her words and said that she did not need to make unnecessary guesses. Her task was only to play her role well. As soon as she brought the stone, he would immediately fulfill his part of the deal. Jaina bowed and said that she had to go then, thinking to herself that he might as well not delude himself. She didn't trust him. Here, the master suddenly seemed to remember something and said, "Could it really be that the rumors that are now circulating about Lady Cassia are her doing?" Jaina froze but remained silent. But then she couldn't restrain herself and turned sharply towards the master. She said that everyone just keeps saying, "Cassia, Cassia, what does it matter to anyone? Does he really care about her too?" He replied that he was simply asking if she had seen Cassia use dark magic. She confirmed that Cassia had used telekinesis filled with a dark aura. It was definitely dark magic. Looking at her, the master thought that it was unlikely that she was lying, because if you lie about a vision through the gift of foresight, the power weakens. Although the girl could have simply been mistaken, there is still a possibility that Cassia awakened black magic. The Magister thought that in any case, Cassia was an unusual girl. His instincts had not failed him again. This means that very interesting events are ahead. However, he turned to Jaina again and told her not to make stupid schemes. Even if the world does not forgive black magic, the Imperial House will not abandon Cassia. Because of rumors, members of the dynasty are not the type to succumb to public pressure. She needs to focus on the stone, otherwise she won't get the crown princess's place. At that moment, a messenger arrived at the Duke of Hall's castle. Cassia's brother was busy with his business in his office. He was interrupted by a messenger who announced that he had a message from His Highness the Crown Prince. He handed it over on embossed paper bearing the Emperor's seal. He said that His Highness had originally intended to invite Lady Cassia personally, but since the engagement between them was postponed indefinitely, he asked to invite the lady on behalf of her brother. Xavier was shocked by such behavior and said that the imperial house really believed some rumors and considered his sister a witch. The envoy said that this was not true, but His Majesty must take into account the reputation of the imperial family, and he himself felt uneasy. Xavier slammed his palm on the table and asked if they really thought his sister had disgraced the imperial house. He claimed that Cassia was just a victim of dirty rumors. The messenger still tried to justify himself on behalf of the prince. However, Xavier cut off his apology and said there was no point in talking anymore. He said that he would take care of his sister himself and ordered that His Highness not be bothered. Finally, the day of the hunting tournament arrived. A large crowd of people gathered in the areas specially designated for this purpose. Everyone was discussing the upcoming event, but for Cassia, it was supposed to bring a lot of trouble. However, she arrived with Baron Xavier, her brother. He extended his hand to her, offering to help her out of the carriage. She was dressed appropriately for the occasion, but her soul was gloomy. Cassia heard whispers from people who said that even the heirs of the Duke's House of Hall had arrived. Xavier stood by her side, ready to protect her if needed. At that moment, Duke Seldry approached them and said that since their father was absent due to a business trip, he thought that only the youngest son would arrive. The hint was too transparent, but Seldry said that he would expect good results from them, and Cassia noted that the competition would be serious. After that, she noticed that Lady Luan was always so calm whenever she met her. She was the eldest daughter of the Duke of Seldry. She was sickly and had a difficult character, so she almost never appeared at balls. The girl noticed that Cassia was always very serious and noble beyond her years. She also dropped a remark about how someone should have shown up at an important reception, but her father interrupted her. It seemed they were talking about their youngest daughter, Jaina. However, Cassia ignored this phrase, wondering where Jaina had really gone. After all, her absence could mean that she was up to something bad again. She was not among the guests, and Xavier also decided to find out if she was planning to attend the event. So he asked the Duke the question directly, noticing how his eldest daughter wrinkled her brow with displeasure. The Duke said she had been here recently, but seemed to have gone away on business. Then he asked for forgiveness and said that they still needed to greet the others. As they turned and walked away, the father scolded his daughter Luan. He asked how she could say nasty things about Jaina right in front of them, and she asked how much longer she had to put up with this pathetic upstart. The father replied that all this was being done for her sake. As soon as Jaina finished her business, they would no longer cross paths. Then the throne of the crown princess would belong to his eldest daughter. Luan asked if he had given Jaina an assignment today as well, to which she received a positive answer. At that moment, she was in the forest in the hunting grounds and was carrying out dangerous tasks. She told her interlocutor that if he did everything as she ordered, he would be generously rewarded. To do this, she showed a bag of gold, which was supposed to be his reward. The interlocutor replied that she should not worry, he would release the monsters exactly as ordered. On his belt hung a pouch with a distinctive insignia. At that moment, Cassia stood and wondered when it would all begin. The servants informed Delius that it was time for him to begin. He replied that the Emperor and Empress themselves were planning to come, and that they needed to wait a little. At that moment, a messenger arrived and said that he had an urgent message for the Crown Prince. He said that the Emperor and Empress were delayed on important business, and he would need to start the tournament under his leadership. If they arrive before the end, they will personally present the award to the participant with the best result. However, now it was time to start. Cassia overheard the conversation and wondered why the head of state was missing such an important event. After all, they attached great importance to this day. They even postponed the hunting date. Something is wrong here. The servant also said that the prince had been ordered not to participate in the hunt, but to remain in the tent and receive senior advisors. It was rather strange, but Deli had no choice but to obey. He called everyone together and said that he was declaring the tournament open. Then he looked into the crowd, but did not see Cassia. She was standing somewhere here just recently. Where could she have gone? He turned his head from side to side unsuccessfully, but could not find her. He needed to talk to her, but she apparently didn't want to give him that opportunity. Cassia walked into the forest and thought that perhaps the incident with the appearance of monsters was someone's sinister intrigue. The infiltration of monsters into the Imperial hunting grounds is an impossible event. It turns out that 3 people who were not present at the ceremony are under suspicion. Cain gave up his place in line to the throne, and Miles Audrey became emperor. There was also Metella Audrey, who became empress thanks to her husband and raised her noble origins to the highest circles. And finally, among the suspects was Jaina and her family, those who had accused Cassia of treason in a past life. However, it was unclear why all the most dangerous events fell to Jaina. She is also their daughter. Why are they treating her so unfairly? Although now it was more important to find a place where monsters would appear. Judging by the terrain, there were two particularly convenient places for monsters to hide in this forest. The first was located in the south of the forest. There is almost no game there, so rarely anyone comes in, and the dense vegetation hides the monsters well. The second location was a cave nearby, perfect for a secret ambush. Cassia urgently needed to find where Jaina had been in contact with the monsters in order to gather evidence. If you hide and attack suddenly, everything might work out. However, surprise was not on her side. She heard some kind of crunch. She didn't dare turn her head, sensing that something completely unexpected was waiting for her there. However, sooner or later it had to be done, but what she saw left her in complete stupor. At this time, Xavier was searching for his sister without success. He was told that she went into the forest, but why did she go there alone without saying anything? He really hoped that his sister wouldn't get into any trouble. He was very worried about her. However, the search was fruitless. He scared away a flock of black birds, which frightened him. They looked so strange that Xavier began to worry even more. He silently prayed to God that his sister would be okay. And at that moment, Cassia was fighting with an unexpected guest. It was the first time she saw such a creature, on two legs, but not a human, with the face of an animal. The girl had never seen real monsters, and now she was discouraged. Apparently, this monster was about to attack her, but she tried to come to her senses in order to save herself. Now was not the time to lose her head. She really hoped that her shooting skills were enough. She silently prayed to herself to pull herself together enough to get into this monster, otherwise it would simply bite her to death. After the shot, Cassia was relieved to see that the arrow had pierced the monster's leg, and she let out a small sigh. But it didn't seem to harm it in any way. It rushed straight at her. With its mouth open, its eyes glowing, and its huge fangs, it was ready to bite her. Cassia looked and did not understand. Was this really the end again? But this time, apparently, everything would be faster. She simply closed her eyes and wouldn't have had time to aim anyway. At that moment, something tingled in her fingers, as if some kind of power had been drawn there. She made a circle around herself and felt like she was in a protective cocoon. Suddenly, the monster simply flew away, even though she didn't even shoot at it. Looking at him, she realized that she had been able to block his attack with magic, but that was her limit. Standing before him, leaning on her knees, she thought that she was not capable of more. And at that moment, she heard a voice that said that he always had to worry about her. It was Duke Kane, who immediately drew his sword. He held Cassia by the waist, and she felt the warmth and power emanating from his body. At that moment, the monster rushed at them again, the Duke prepared to attack. He raised his sword, and Cassia felt all his muscles clench. This was far from the first battle for the Duke, and he felt calm and focused. What made it difficult was that he needed to make sure the monster didn't harm Cassia. He put all his strength into his strike to make sure it was a sure hit. The sword was immediately stained with the monster's crimson blood. The blow was strong, but not fatal. Kane said he didn't understand how a monster could come from the Emperor's hunting grounds when it was over 1,000 kilometers north from here. He told Cassia that it was unsafe here, that they needed to warn the others immediately and stop the competition until they figured out what was going on. Cassia shook her head and said that no one should know about this. The Duke turned around in surprise, and she said that it was all a setup. He asked if someone had intentionally released the monster, but at that moment an enemy was preparing to attack him from behind. Cassia shouted, trying to warn him, but she didn't have time. The monster slashed his shoulder, and the Duke told Cassia to run away. I needed to call for help. There could still be others here. Cassia was still opposed. She said that outsiders should not be involved. She tried to explain to him that someone was trying to harm him, and if the rumors spread beyond the hunting grounds, it would all be over. The girl reasonably noted that there was only one monster here, and now all they needed to do was get rid of it. Kane didn't understand why she was so worried about him, but he decided to agree. He prepared for battle to finish off this monster. Cassia refused to leave, but remembering the rumors about his experience and abilities, she realized that she was in the way. With his strength and power, the Duke could have dealt with the monster long ago, but he was distracted. Instead of fighting all out, he focused on protecting her. She needed to get rid of all traces before anyone came. She didn't want to be a burden. Cassia asked permission to help him and pulled the bowstring. The main thing was not to hit the Duke himself. She wasn't shooting so confidently yet. Nevertheless, she took aim and released the arrow. And then she shouted for the Duke to step aside so as not to touch him. His reaction was indeed instantaneous. He moved away as soon as he heard her scream. The arrow hit the monster in the chest. She turned out to be a very good shot. The monster howled, holding the painful spot, but the Duke decided not to waste time. Coming close to him, he pierced him with his sword, leaving no chance of survival. His gaze at that moment was stern, but still wildly beautiful. The monsters seemed to evaporate, leaving only a black haze around them. Cassia asked the Duke if he was all right. He replied that everything was fine. His rapid breathing had almost returned to normal. Only Cassia noticed that he was wounded and immediately asked to be allowed to help him. After examining him, she concluded that fortunately there were no serious injuries. Cassia ran her hand over his shoulder, checking how deep the monster's claws had dug into him, and felt him instinctively tense. Then she asked him how he ended up there, and he replied that he saw her walking into the forest alone. He followed her because it could be dangerous. He had no bad intentions. Cassia looked at him and understood that he was now making excuses. However, looking down, she thought that he had seen her use her power, so would she really have to keep her distance now? He himself understood what she was thinking and said that he would not tell anyone about what he saw. Cassia looked up at him, her gaze brightened, and she thanked him with all her heart. He said they needed to clean up the place now, reminding her that she had said he was someone's target. Cassia noticed that he was very reasonable, even in such a situation. She said it was true, but there was no evidence yet. They needed to find it. First, you should clean up the scene and look around. The Duke asked what exactly she wanted to study, and she replied that it was about the cave. In the south, they found no signs of anyone's presence, only this cave remains. She was already worried about what would happen if no evidence was found there either. Kane noted that it was quite dark in there, telling her to be careful. At that moment, Cassia felt like she tripped over something, and when she bent down, she saw a bag with a purple symbol on it. Cassia asked what it was. She had never seen anything like it before. However, the Duke apparently knew this, as he looked at him in bewilderment. This symbol was used by an organization called Canis. It was an illegal organization, consisting mainly of mages and active in the north. They can control monsters. The owner of this bag must be the criminal who released that monster. Kane said that when he met magicians, if they went on a journey, they always carried their pets in magic bags. At that moment, they heard someone's footsteps approaching. A man hidden under a hood was approaching the cave. He looked around, not finding what he had left there. At that moment, there was the clang of a sword being pressed against his neck. The Duke picked up the bag and asked if he was looking for this, the monster that was hiding in it, but he mumbled and did not give a clear answer.